the first thing I wanted to do is actually bring in an external voice. We had a brown bag meeting here a while back from a hiring manager in user experience design and design in general. His career covered a few different things, but he talked about resumes and cover letters and then portfolios. And I just wanted to share what he said about portfolios to get another perspective on the hiring process that he goes through. And I'll share the link to this video as well in the channel. It would be worth just reviewing again if you watched it before, or if you haven't watched it, to take a look at it. But let me get this set up to play. I was playing it back at fast speed earlier. Let's see. Are you hearing this okay?
Not hearing it at all.
No, we're not getting anything.
Christian, I want to make sure that we still can't hear anything.
Sorry, did somebody say something?
Yeah, I was just saying we still aren't hearing this.
Oh, you still aren't? Okay. Sorry, we've been playing for a little while.
I thought you were still working to figure it out.
Oh.
Audio.
Me too. I was about to say, is something
Sorry.
happening right now, or?
Let me think. See. Said share computer sound. Okay. Still no audio?
Nothing.
Was that a no? I couldn't hear people.
Yeah, no, we're still not hearing anything.
Okay. Well, I might give up on that because the Zoom controls say I'm sharing sound. So, oh well. I'll just share the link to that, and then you can go and view it on your own time, so we don't waste time trying to troubleshoot that. Okay, so that's available to you. I just thought it was interesting. There were a couple of things I was going to point out about it. He shares a few different portfolios in the video where there's people that are not going very visual. There's just a short bit of paragraph of text at the front that he felt were effective ways of conveying information about that. And some additional side writing on the side that he felt was a good example of somebody showcasing their other work that they've done. So part of my reason for sharing that is because each hiring manager is going to be a little bit different. And so the more that you can aim at a specific hiring manager, as I've mentioned before, the better off you will be to be able to align with their expectations. So one example he gives is someone who he actually hired who had sent a personalized page on their portfolio to him as a hiring manager. It was designed for the company that he was applying for, and it was effective in that case. So just another plug for being very focused on the jobs that you're applying for. It's much harder, again, for bigger companies that are applied to by everybody, the Apples, Googles, Facebooks, those types, but smaller organizations definitely going to be easier to target that way. Okay, so let's go ahead and close out of that. We will jump over to Keynote. All right, today we're diving a little bit more into the visual side of our portfolio design and discussing some of those skills that I think we've addressed before in some of the units, but I want to just review them again today, be able to try to answer any questions you may have as we talk through those things. So the first thing is your personal style guide, and that is the typography color palette that you've developed to represent across all touch points. So with color, you will generally be most successful if you start with a very a simple color palette, a grayscale, and then one primary color. You don't want to overuse color in your portfolio, because the more color you add in, the more it's hard to interpret what the colors mean, and the less impact each individual color has. So only add secondary colors if you need them, and the secondary colors do need to have a meaning or complement to the primary color. So I think we've talked a little bit about color theory, that color communicates ideas to viewers. Warm colors tend to be bold, exciting, and aggressive, while cool colors tend to be more stable, inviting, and tame. And you want to pick a color that represents you. You don't want to pick a color that's, say, too neon or jarring, something that's very bold, because you have the potential to be off-putting for a larger portion of your potential audience. You don't want to scare a hiring manager away. Of course, if that's you and that's part of your persona, then that's great, and you can run with whatever color you choose. Just be aware of the limitations that puts on your job search, in that it will probably divide your potential pool of hiring managers to a smaller subset. You want to refine your colors to find one that's meaningful or that's appealing to look at. Next, we want to talk about typefaces. You want to start with one primary typeface, and your objective is not to make the typeface call attention to itself. It should be an effective typeface that just draws the visitor in. You don't want to make it complicated. You don't want to choose one of those very flashy, stylistic type fonts, most likely. You want to keep it simple. Only add a secondary typeface if you absolutely need one, and you're very confident in your use of typography. And that secondary typeface should complement your first one. Remember that your typefaces have meaning. The typeface that you choose will have a message to convey outside from the words themselves. Serifs tend to be seen as elegant but old school, whereas sans serifs tend to be modern and conventional. You can pick sharp, bold typefaces or curved, friendly ones. You can make a safe choice and pick a typeface that everyone recognizes, or you can find an obscure one that might impress a designer if it's not too over the top. So with colors, you can often observe colors that are out in the web, and as you're looking at portfolios and other websites, find a feeling of a type of color or shade that you enjoy and feels represents you, and feel like it represents the personal narrative that you've developed and the feeling that you want to create for the hiring managers that are reviewing your portfolios. And you want to check its accessibility, review and dribble colors, develop a color palette based on it. And then you want to do a similar thing with typography. So I want to demonstrate a couple of things that you can do, because we've looked at our developer tools. Let's see, to find this site. So if you're on a site, oops, clicked on the wrong one again. A site that you like, for example, and you see a color that appeals to you. We've done this before in our web portion of our course. But you can look for what that color is by right-clicking, doing inspect, and coming over to the CSS and finding that color. So you can find that hex code here. You can copy and paste it. And there's a tool called, it's associated with Dribble, and it grabs the URL for that. I'll have to come back. Dribble colors lets you see how other people have used that same color and see if the feeling that is conveyed by the use of that color is similar to the feeling that you're trying to convey in your own designs. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that color here that I had grabbed. Oops. Copy. I had to right click that in order to get to it. And you can enter in the hex code here. And it selects colors that are like that one. You can see that all of these shades are not exactly the same. But what it's doing is it's sampling from that and getting a range around that color and pulling those up. So you can get a feel for whether people who are using this in Dribble are conveying that same type of feeling, or that it matches your design. So that's a good way to get a sense for the color you want to choose and whether it is conveying the meaning that you want it to convey. It's also a good place to find a color that could match your color theme. You see how other designers have used these colors and how they work with that primary color. So seeing this red compared to the blues behind it, again, a red here, seeing how these reds go along with a purple or a yellow or a green can be good accent colors. See how they fit together. It's a good way to explore colors a little bit. And now, while we're talking about colors, looking at Sean Park's portfolio and a well-established designer, you can see the color usage on this site is very spare in terms of the material that he has created for this site. So he has a light purple, has a light, looks like a little bit of a gray in that white background, and then black and white and gray in this imagery. So it starts out very spare. The button itself is even black. So black headlines and gray subheadlines, and another darker gray for call out text. So he's working within a grayscale, and then imagery can use whatever color is relevant to that imagery that pulls somebody into the case study. So it's a very effective way to use color, is to keep colors very minimal, and then the imagery that you use in the site can be effective. So again, black, gray, white, and then white on this button. Another example is this designer, Andre Salier. Takes a very bold approach using a red background for his main introductory section. But again, other than that text, or that text block background, the only other color is in the imagery that's associated with the case studies that they have. So a light gray background, gray for text, a black for selected text, and then body copy. And the only other color is in the imagery that's provided. And in these diagrams. Then as far as fonts go, the tendency for new designers and people really discovering how to use fonts and put them into place will be to go and find some of the most stylistically different fonts to play with and put into their designs. So let's go to Google Fonts here for a minute. And I'm going to pull up another tab. Google Fonts is a good resource because it has fonts that are available to you to use for free without having to pay royalties. There are a lot of great fonts that cost $400 or $500 to purchase the fonts. Some fonts you can buy like the bold version or the regular version for $35 to $50. And then you buy a whole font family for $400, $500. But for most starting designers, it's just not tenable to be able to buy a font like that. So going to Google is there's some good solid fonts on Google. But there are also some very stylistic fonts, things like this font called Yon Sung has very brushstroke letters, which are good and stylistic for certain purposes. But even though they may look fun, they may come across as not matching or being overly designed for a designer's portfolio. See, same with something like handwritten type fonts or cursive fonts or these stencil style fonts. Those have certain use cases, but in almost all cases, it would be detrimental to a portfolio to use those just because they come across as I think overly designed is the right term. It's like not nuanced enough. Kind of a blunt stroke to your portfolio design. So typography is not necessarily my strong suit and something that I spend much time thinking about. My interface design has mostly been built within other people's style guidelines for the most part. Whenever I've been asked to design for something, I go with a very stable and not too exciting font. So I often will turn to Lato as a source. That's an open source Google font as well. So let's see, Lato. It's a fairly common web font. I think it's really like a Helvetica replacement. It's very similar to Helvetica, but it has some good variants that you can use to give some nuance and hierarchy to your text and type. So that's a good font. And this super family is from Google Fonts. I'll share this link with you.
What are your thoughts on using something like, I don't know, like Montserrat or Oswald or like Josephine Sans, which are also sans serif fonts, but I definitely think they're a little funner than like Lato is, but yeah.
So let's pull up those and we can see back to search. So like, I think was Montserrat one you mentioned?
Yeah, I think if I was going to use it, I'd probably use it for like just the title or my name or something. I wouldn't use it for like the whole portfolio. I'd probably
I think Montserrat's a good strong font without it's not being overbearing or too out there for sure. Okay. Montserrat's a good one. What were the other ones you mentioned?
Oswald and Josephine Sans.
That's a good strong font as well. The thinner nature of that one in some ways feels a little dated to me, but it's not badly. Like I would never look at that and think, yuck. So for me that feels like a good strong font still.
It's just one of those like, because I feel like it's really like there are some fonts out there that it's like really like the Yeon Sung that's right there. Like that's obviously not something we're gonna want to use.
Right.
But so, there's also a lot of gray area.
Yeah, and that's true. And as a designer, you begin to be able to make those choices. And the more that you study typography, the more that you will feel comfortable taking a stand on a specific typeface. And even if you decide to go out on a limb for a more playful typeface that's not fitting within like a traditional type of typeface, then you could even have a note on your portfolio about why you chose that font and sort of express your typography skills in that way. So it's all really within your prerogative as a designer to take that approach and go beyond. But you just weigh the pros and cons of whether that will resonate well with more hiring managers or fewer, and maybe it's the fewer that you're really going for, in which case, great, and that should be your objective. But yeah, I think the other ones that you mentioned all feel like good solid fonts to me. So let's see, I was sharing superfamilies. These are some good fonts that I have found to be useful. Roboto is a good font. I've never used Quattrocentro, but I've used Roboto and Merriweather. And I believe Nick is using Nunito on his portfolio site. And then I haven't used Allegria, but there are some good choices here that no one would necessarily fault you for using. Although I did hear from Elizabeth in labs, and she's someone who has much stronger typography feelings and skill set. She said that a lot of people coming into labs have used Nunito in their portfolio, and so she was wondering if we were teaching people to use Nunito, or if they're just seeing Nick's and grabbing that because they like that font. And I mean, it's a good font, but it's got the rounded ends on that. You can see if you go to Nunito, you see how it's rounded on the ends. It's a little more playful, a little more friendly, and that can potentially come off as not professional. I don't know that it does for me, but anyway, that was just a note that she said. So think about your fonts and definitely play around with a couple that you really like and see how things fit together. And the best way to get experience is to try those different fonts and use them in juxtaposition with each other. Do the same design with different fonts and see how they feel when you look at them, see how other people respond to them. Say a preference test, or what's the first word that you use to describe this when you see it. See if they use different words to describe the same design that has different fonts in it. All of that, if you can do that quickly and get through, then you can finally land on a font that you feel comfortable with and more confident with. I was looking through a few portfolios, and a few of the portfolios that were receiving awards had fonts that I just grabbed a few to see which ones were paid and which ones weren't. So I pulled up a couple of the ones that were not paid or that were free available through Google Fonts. Sans Source Pro was one, has a good group of different font weights and styles that can allow you to just use this one font family and then be able to have nuance between your text hierarchy. It has a little more variety, but then still cohesive because it's part of the same family. Enter font family. I'm going to go ahead and share this link. I'm not saying that you should use this, but since this wasn't in Google Fonts, I just wanted to be able to share that with you. This is also available as a web font, and I believe it was down here. I can't remember. There was a way to load it on your website. Oh, there it was. Use that CSS. You can reference it as a web file or a web font. And then Nunito is the other one we looked at just now. Now, if you subscribe to Adobe products, we haven't taught that in our classes at all, but people who use Photoshop, Illustrator have access to Adobe fonts for free as well. So there's a few good fonts in the Adobe library as well. An example, Arvo is a good slab serif font. But if you're not paying for Adobe products, then this is something that you would have to pay for separately. But if you are paying for the Adobe Creative Suite, then it comes free as part of that. Something to consider as well. Any other thoughts or questions about using color and typography and fonts in creating your design style guide? Let me jump over to the side OC. Okay, regarding colors in your portfolio, is this data coming from hiring managers? What companies are they working for? Banks, healthcare, etc. This is basically information that we've gleaned both from our internal team and then some of the feedback from hiring managers. The hiring managers were really all across the spectrum. So the counsel I'm giving is based on good design principles of keeping things simple and trying not to overwhelm with color. But if you're going for a specific industry, say banking or in healthcare, and you look at all of the types of sites and the styling of the company that you're trying to apply for, and you see much more flamboyant or gregarious type of design styling, then if that's the type of design that you gravitate towards, there's no rule that says you can't do that. And you may have to have that discussion when you're in labs trying to get a endorsement interview completed with the labs team. But the critical thing is making a case for why you're doing what you're doing in terms of color and styling, because there's no rule about design, and trends come and go, and the way people perceive designs changes over time. And people who are on the cutting edge tend to be outlandish compared to the existing designs. And if that's what you're going for, then you have a case, say, this is the type of design I have, and these are the types of designers that I relate to and the types of companies I'm trying to work for. And if you can make that case, then it's good design. If you can't make the case, then our recommendation is to go with a more simplified approach. So I don't know if I fully answered that question. Let me know if I can do some follow-up discussion of that. And I'm happy to talk more about it or clarify anything I've said. Don't companies hiring UX designers want to see that you're capable of working with colors very well, not just in the projects? That's a good question. And it depends on what you mean by using colors very well. And effective use of color is usually by limiting the amount of color that's going on the page. And but it's just harder to, the more you get more colors into your design, to make it effective across all the different pieces. But if you have good color design skills and you want to include more colors, by all means have a go at it. And then if we see that there's something that, as you get into your portfolio design, that there might be a concern, then we'll have a discussion. But other than that, this is your design project, and our objective is always to try to help you get hired. So that's where these guidelines are based on, and you can deviate and prove us wrong, no problem. We don't have any problem with that. But that being said, your portfolio is, a lot of people say good design is design that you don't notice or that gets out of the way of the content or the material that it's going. So if you are able to do that with your portfolio, not trying to call attention to yourself as a designer with that portfolio design, but by surfacing your case studies and the information about you through this design, that actually shows your quality of design by stepping that design back out of the way a little bit. But as you know, design is not easy, and it's not something that comes naturally to most people. So we work at it, learn these skills, learn the attributes, and we end up with a better product. And then how would you present typography in a portfolio? Any examples? That's a good question. If the question is how do you showcase your typography skills, the best way to do that, I think, is in the final designs that you've created for whatever interface you have. And when you put up those designs, you can talk about your typography choices, and just in a little paragraph talk about why you made the font choice you did, if that's important to you to be able to convey that skill set. why you chose the font you chose, what led you to that decision, and how you developed your type scale and your relationship between other fonts, or etc. The sizing of your fonts and why you made those decisions. You can encapsulate all of those decisions in a paragraph probably pretty easily with an example of a type scale image or something similar along with the final designs, and that will convey your typography skills to a hiring manager. If you want to go in depth more, then there's certainly a place where if you feel strongly about your own typography skills and you love typography and that's something that you want hiring managers to know about, you can have a second menu item that talks about typography. You can even put that in your main navigation, and then you can write up a very brief synopsis of your typography philosophy and skill set, and help that hiring manager understand where you stand on typography and your skills, and showcase whatever you want to in that regard. As far as examples, I don't have any off the top of my head right now, but if that's something that you have trouble finding, then we can definitely help, and I'll help you look some up. So let me know. Okay. Any other questions there? Okay, let's jump into designing a portfolio. Actually, I need a drink. My throat is getting dry. So let's do a 3-minute break really quick. Just a short one. Got a timer here. And I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So let's talk a little bit about this process again, really quickly. We always start with research. And in this case, we've done the user research for you and shared some of that information at the beginning of this week's material. You can still ask anyone you know who hires what they look for in an applicant, and you can look for inspiration and research what your competition is doing. We've done a little bit of that competitive analysis over the last few days. And then we went to content first, get everything written, and that was the hardest step, but informs everything that comes after it. And we tried to have you work on that. There's probably always room for refinement in the content that you've developed so far, but that informs where you're going with this design. And then ideation, exploring multiple directions. You don't want to lock yourself into your first idea. You want to go for multiple iterations as quickly as possible in terms of fonts, experiment with colors, experiment with layout, and the information architecture, how things are structured down the page, within the navigation, all of that. Do a lot of iterations on that. Then following ideation, we begin to add structure to the best ideation ideas that you come up with, and there's no reason to be afraid to remix them. And you can go back to ideation again. So going through ideas to bringing it out into a low fidelity type low fidelity prototype, and then if it's not working, go back and ideate more. Start working with that content within that prototype. You get that structure made and work on the information architecture. And then moving from that phase where you might be in wireframes or sketches, but filling out with content, moving into a style guide, getting that style guide in order before you start doing that high fidelity. It will help you work from that limited palette and gives you a little bit of constraints that make for a more successful design. And remember, you can always go back and change it later. We don't have to be afraid of going down the wrong path. At this phase, we try to do that as quickly as possible so that, but by the time you're done working through some ideation, you get to a product that you like. Then with high fidelity, you focus on that visual communication and you sweat the details, those small little nuances that make a big difference in a design. And following that, you implement it, making it live, and just getting it out there, ready for people to consume. Even at that stage, there's no reason why you can't make changes and updates. If you find that something is not resonating with people, if you run it by them in a usability study, they're not understanding the structure or the layout, or some colors are not conveying the right information that you want it to, you can always make changes. That's one of the good things about designing for the web or mobile devices, as opposed to designing for buildings that get built and then have to stay in place for dozens or hundreds of years. So that's just a reiteration of the process that we're thinking about as we go through this. So we're going to talk about a few of these design principles, and I want to do it in context of looking at some other portfolio sites. And then I'd love to get questions and feedback as we go through this about anything that you have questions about regarding why I'm saying something or that. Right. First, go to Slido. No questions there. Okay. So one of the first design principles that I wanted to talk about is clarity, contrast, and hierarchy. On this particular portfolio, we have, I'd like to hear from you actually. What do you see on this portfolio that represents clarity, contrast, and hierarchy, or doesn't match that design principle? And let me actually share this link with you so you can see it more closely. What do you see that?
There's obviously the title, and then the important sort of headlines are bolded.
Okay, so we have some clarity added here by having a title at the very top. Some contrast. The bold is helping contrast from the white background. It's very clear to see those pieces. Important elements are standing out, so it makes it scannable to see these headlines or these titles. Yeah, that's great. Anything else in terms of clarity or hierarchy or contrast? One thing that I noticed was, excuse me, this font size is extremely small for the web. This is 12-point font. Readable text is generally in the 14 to 16 font range. And you're thinking about how far someone is away from their computer screen. If the audience for this was at all in the range of older, my age and a little bit older, then we begin to feel, perceive contrast a little bit less. So the fact that these are very light gray against that white background, I would worry a little bit about visibility. And I haven't done an actual accessibility test on this. But given the audience, maybe that's okay because it's trending towards a younger audience in the hiring manager for UX. And they would probably be able to see it fine. But it's something that I would worry about and consider, should I make this a little bit bigger just for readability's sake and maybe a little bit more contrast so that this stands out a little bit more? Or maybe it's not a readability issue at all. So that was something I noticed about that side. Anything else? Okay, how about on this one? Let's talk about the next three principles as well as clarity, contrast, and hierarchy for this one. So there's clarity, contrast, and hierarchy. I'll pull this over so we can see it. Excuse me. We have clarity, contrast, and hierarchy, repetition and consistency, space and alignment, and color. We've already talked a little bit about color on this design. But any thoughts that you have on this one? I'll share this in the channel as well.
One thing I see is that the product designer is a lot less lighter than the text underneath.
Okay. All right. So yeah, product designer is a much lighter color than that. So that provides good contrast between the headline and the subheadline. if
Right.
if this gray is too light, it could be a readability issue, but because it's large and bold, that
Mhm.
becomes less of an issue. But yeah, definitely we see some distinction between those, and that can help us decide what's important and what's not important for them, what they think we should see first and what should
Right.
be seen second. So good. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
How about space and alignment?
How do you feel about Sean Park in like 2 lines instead of 1 line?
That's a good question. I personally like the amount of white space up here.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, this feels like a good usage of space where we're keeping all of this content in a very close nugget, and all of that feels like a unit. The Gestalt
Mhm.
principles of proximity,
Right.
and then it leaves this area open, and this illustration bumping into that space feels like it's
Intentional.
got good dynamics, yeah, and
Okay.
definitely intentional. So I'm great with it stacked like that.
Gotcha.
I think that the Korean characters are stacked, so you immediately feel like Sean Park just makes sense because of the characters.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great little detail. Any other thoughts on repetition, consistency, space and alignment, color, or even any of these other graphics and media attention to detail,
I
creativity?
think for me, you know where it says I am an interface designer and a product, I feel like that whole card or that whole thing is definitely not with like a theme, because it's like all the way to the left like the card, and then it's not really aligned, I guess. I'm not too sure if that was supposed to be like that, but
Okay, so this feels out of place to you in terms of your, as you're going through, it doesn't feel like it fits with the structure of the site. Is that what, did I understand that right?
No, what I'm talking about is it fits, but I feel like maybe if you were to move that to fit with the spaces and margins, it would probably look a lot better. Because you can see that it is stretched out all the way to the left of the page.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I'm
Like the card itself.
curious about that. So,
It's not. That's the only one actually.
yeah, it is an element that is not aligned with any other of the pieces on the page. To me, I felt like it was probably deliberate, but I can see where you're coming from, that doesn't fit with that. We do get that margin of this text within that box that makes that align. So, but
the
yeah,
box itself is different.
so that is definitely an interesting design choice, and it's not something that struck me as wrong, but that may be coming from me thinking, if I come to this page as that is, it feels like that's actually a good diagonal balance between the white at the top right and the black at the top or the bottom left. But
so, would you feel like that was intentional when first going onto the site, maybe, or portfolio?
Yeah. My personal perception was that was intentional.
Right.
So let me see the cover. This div. So it looks like, yeah, we've got that padding that's around it. So all of that feels like it's probably intentional. So what I'm going to do is, just out of curiosity, to margin left, do 200 pixels. That's not the right spacing. Margin left. Just do 20 pixels.
That looks about right.
So if it's overlapping, does that still look good? This is something that I like to do sometimes with designs. You can see that it's responsive.
I see it.
So it's sort of changing alignment at that different breakpoint as well. So I was adjusting for that specific breakpoint.
But now, do you feel like there's a lot of vacant space from the left start and something like that?
Yeah.
Because when you do resize it, there's a lot of more vacant space within that darker box.
So if you look at like the sides of this, like there's really not anything in those margins except for those lines. So I personally wouldn't consider that to be empty. I would just consider that to be part of the margin that's on the page already. Because like there's nothing else except for those, like I said, like except for those little embellishments. I really wouldn't consider that to be empty space.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and really it's a design preference. If I come to the site and it looks like this, it's a little more static and it doesn't paint the same picture I think that this designer is trying to go for, which is some disruption to the page to make it feel more dynamic, as opposed to a very closed off type of I don't know if closed off is the right word, but feeling more computer-like, if that makes sense. So we're trying to get more organic as opposed to interface level.
Or a resume of some sort.
Right. So anyway, that was an interesting experiment. I think we can play with CSS and see what that actually looks like. To me, this doesn't have the same designerly feel to it of what I think they were trying to convey with the organic nature of this imagery, and then having that inset to sort of tie their identity into some of this other material up above it. But this is something where it's not good or bad, it's just different. And for me, I think that the way that they've designed it, I'm gonna refresh that, matches more, I think, what I would expect from this particular designer given their other material that they've got. But it's just me, so yeah, they're right or wrong. Thanks for the comment. I appreciate being able to have that discussion. Let's look at best folios. We're going to pull up a student portfolio. I'm just pulling this at random. We can talk a little bit about this designer's. Designer's portfolio. Looks like maybe they have expanded beyond being a student, potentially. But all right, thinking about these design principles that we're talking about: clarity, contrast, hierarchy, repetition, consistency, space and alignment, color, typography, graphics and media, attention to detail and creativity. What thoughts do you have about this particular designer?
Can you scroll like down a little bit more, just so we?
This is the very bottom of the page.
Oh, this is the very bottom. Yep.
Well, it's very
This
minimal.
doesn't look very creative. Just kind of right there. Currently working on this. I worked on this, and these are the teams.
This kind of looks more like a resume,
Yeah.
like
Okay.
than a portfolio.
Okay. How about the design specifically? It does come across less like the other portfolios we've seen for sure. We're seeing different representation of information than we've been typically seeing. I think Kelsey, had you started to say something?
Yeah, I was just thinking about because so that @eFounders in bright green kind of looks like it's something you can click on and will maybe take you to an area where you can contact her or something. But then she also has contact and email underlined, which feels repetitive. If you have email underlined, I don't know why you need to have contact there too. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know.
All right, so we're providing some affordance here that's different than the affordance here, so that's not really consistent, and the expectation for each one of those maybe gets muddled by that inconsistency.
I also find it interesting that for her past works, she has sort of this brief text summary of what it is, but she doesn't do that at all for the ones that she's currently working on. So an Upflow and ZenFest, I kind of feel like those could be anything. And it would be nice to have a little bit more context of what exactly those projects are.
Okay. I think that's very true. We have some consistent
Well,
subheadings type of thing there, but nothing up there.
If you click on the links, I guess these are all links. If you click on it, it does take you to all of the websites.
Okay.
For these places, but I do agree. There's other than that, there's nothing. She doesn't even really specify what she's worked on for these places. You just it's just basically go to the website and look at it.
Mm-hmm. So that feels like some consistent behaviors, but inconsistent design that leads you to those behaviors, and then you're not sure necessarily what you're supposed to do once you're on those sites. And the email one actually doesn't click for me, so that is confusing as well because there's affordance here, but it's not working there.
And email me if you dare is a little aggressive as well. I would probably tone it down.
What is aggressive, you say?
Email me if you dare. I know for what she's doing, I would have expected this in sort of a gaming portfolio. It fits, but hers is everything is, I don't know. I mean, I like it. It's funny, but I would have expected in more of a gaming or VR or I don't know, something a bit more fun than what she does here.
So that definitely has some meaning behind it above and beyond the meaning of the words, which conveys a feeling and an expectation and would be potentially off-putting for a design hiring manager, perhaps out of those fields.
For what she's displaying, hers is very minimal, and I mean it just doesn't the personality she has in her portfolio doesn't really match that sentence. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I would agree.
And it's a weird it feels like a call to action, but then you can't actually click on that. So
on the email.
Yeah, it's misleading.
Oops. Yeah, that definitely is either an error in the code or something, or an error in the design. So either way, it is not what you expect. So we do have some consistency in these headers. Currently working on selected past works, but not on teams. So it begins to make me wonder: is this different? Should I treat this differently? and the visual hierarchy of those, it feels like that having more prominence to those labels would help me better navigate to what it is that I want to look at right away. And because these links are so big, then I have to look at them and then look here and say, oh, these are selected past works, and then come back again. So this goes back to the principle of don't make me think, where we don't want to add steps in any process, even if it's just cognitive, getting from here to there. It's a few milliseconds of cognitive processing, but if you're doing 30 tabs of a bunch of different designers, then you know, okay, this is going to be harder for them to buy into than the other ones. If someone has more time, maybe not as much of a big deal. So what do you think about these colored dots on the left-hand side?
I like them.
You like them? Okay.
But they're too small. Like I didn't notice them until I paid a little bit more attention.
Okay.
Because she has no other colors.
I just don't know what purpose they serve.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. I feel like they're specifically like color coded for a reason, but I don't know what that reason is. And like some of these blue dots, they look like really similar. Like it's hard to see the difference between them. So then I'm like, are those things connected somehow? Or is it just a coincidence? And like the upflow has a green dot. Does that mean it's something that she's working on with the @eFounders, which is also green? I don't know. I feel like there are more questions than answers with that design choice.
Okay. So we have two aspects of what colors do for us. One is to convey meaning, and another is to create feelings. So with these dots, there's the potential that it's creating a feeling for the designers being playful or being.
I don't think there's a correlation between the colors. He just put out some colors.
So yeah, that's the point I'm getting at. That is
I agree.
what it looks like.
That's random.
which then raises the question: is that a good use of that color as those dots? Because I think I had the same response that Kelsey did. Was first do those mean something? Am I supposed to tie these colors together? Are the bluish ones similar? Are the purplish ones similar? So the colors are nice colors, but then you've got the layer of meaning that color usually has in interfaces, and there's a potential for causing initial confusion when people come to the site to try to make sense of it before actually just saying. So is there a way to use these colors that can convey the same emotional feel as sort of decorative elements that doesn't lend themselves to feeling like they're interface level elements that are trying to convey information? And that's a thing that a designer can juggle and say, well, what's more important to me and what should I do at that point? So we've seen a few examples there, and most of those links just go to a project, and we don't have context around what their role was in the project and things like that. So we have some weakness there. All right, let's go back to another portfolio and see what else we can see. Let's try this one. I'll post the link in Slack so you can open it up yourselves if you want. Okay, again, take a couple minutes to have a look at this, looking at design principles, clarity, contrast, hierarchy, repetition and consistency, space and alignment, color, typography, graphics and media, attention to detail, and creativity. What are the things that you notice?
And the good thing I noticed, kind of noticed at first, is his contacts or his LinkedIn, Medium, and Twitter. That's good because it says, "Oh, hey, you can contact him there." But it kind of looks a little plain. Not a lot of design to it, just a grid of his works.
So, what do you mean by not a lot of design?
Like, I don't know. If I was a hiring manager, I would look at this, go like, scan it, and maybe close it. Because if you just look at it, it's very, very plain. A lot of white space, not a lot of, whoa, look at this. Wow factor is what I guess.
I don't know. I kind of feel like he did this to kind of maybe not have the design of the site kind of like he overshadowed the other stuff that he's got up. Because if you actually like click on the projects that he's got and you go into the actual case studies, like the first one, it's actually pretty substantial.
Oh yeah, that definitely looks better.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like maybe it's just to sit there and just be like, hey, here's all the stuff that I did, and maybe just kind of bring attention to that.
But do you think that he could have done a little bit more instead of just the entire page white? Because I did see that he has like a black box, and he could put everything inside of the black box on the bottom.
Well, I mean, maybe the minimalism just kind of like speaks to his style.
So, I'll comment in terms of what a hiring manager is looking for. Will often not be wow factor if you're going into this seeking a role in UX where you're going to be jumping into a design system and you've got several peers, that sort of thing, where what they need to know is, have you worked on projects and do that, diving into the case study. So from my perspective as a hiring manager, I would look at this and think, first of all, I said, did he draw that? It's kind of a cool sketch. And then I'd read this and it would be very clear. Okay, previously developed payment UX at Intuit, helped the artists at Pixar, and designed a MailChimp. So that builds some credibility. And full-time designer at a nonprofit startup, recognized by President Obama's White House. So they're starting to sort of fluff up the resume, not in a negative way, but makes me feel like, okay, there feels like some credibility here. I'll dig a little bit deeper and jump into this. So I don't feel like the lack of other pieces in this design feels under-designed, if that makes sense. But I get the point that I think there is, it's pretty sparse, it is pretty spare. And I think some of these screenshots that are used in this portfolio are not used to the best effect. But given the audience needing to just find portfolio material, get a sense of ability, then it's a pretty straightforward and easy to use site. And so would probably get me looking at least a case study, if that makes sense. And again, no right or wrong, there's better or worse, and the better or worse can often be different in cases of different viewing hiring managers and what it is that what resonates with them the most. what other reactions do you have in terms of some of these other things? Use of color, very limited use of color just in links here, provides affordance for clickability. There's some interesting use of color on the hovers, which feels inconsistent, and I'm not sure what the meaning is behind those, why they would be colored differently. No real pattern to that coloration. Not sure. Let's see. Any other thoughts about any of this material on this person's site? Any thoughts about the typography? I think most of us probably came to this site and didn't even think about the typography because it just looked like it didn't look old, or it didn't look out of place, at least to me. I don't know if anyone else had a different experience. And curious what font they're using. So I right click and inspect. They're using Open Sans, which is a common font I've seen in modern design. I think that one's available in Adobe Fonts. Going to the portfolio page. An interesting color choice here that feels inconsistent to previous design, but it feels it's consistent compared to the hover color. Let's look at one more. Go back to portfolios. Just go to random one here. All right, again, responding to design principles. Share that link. While you're looking at that, pull up Sida, see if someone's posted any questions. I think there. Right, what response do you have in terms of visual design principles?
I really like this one.
You really do?
Yeah. I mean, it could be argued that there could be more of like a text description of some of the projects that they've worked on. Like it is just images. And it could even be said that maybe the colors for the backgrounds they chose are a little bit random, but I kind of feel like the backgrounds make sense for each project. Like the logo color for that purple one, if you look at the screen, it has like purple elements in it. And some of the like pink and purples that are on the lower left hand like computer screen, those kind of go with like the rest of the colors that are being used in the portfolio overall. And yeah, I don't know. I think it looks nice.
Okay. So use of color, they've got some patterns that you can kind of gauge by what's in the imagery. So it in most cases matches that expectation, or it makes sense, as you said. Limited use of color elsewhere, of this reddish color that is a lot with this little animation here. Those tied together for that sense of color consistency. What other response do people have? No thoughts? I might be a little concerned with the contrast on those very lightweight fonts over this lighter purple. The bold, it looks like it's probably fine. This top type size feels a little bit small, but at the same time, compared to the other hierarchy, I wonder how important it is to call that out. But font size, do an inspect. See if I can find font size. It looks like they had been counting from rems, so I'm not sure what it calculates to. Font size computed to 14 point. Maybe that it's lightweight. It makes it feel small. Just the juxtaposition next to the really giant headline font.
I think it being italicized also affects the legibility a little bit with how light it is. Because the things tend to like, it's like they blur together a little bit more, the text does.
Yeah. So they have a consistent use of color on this page, and it's the same color that they had on that previous page. All elements are tied together with the color. So I wonder why they jumped from this size font down to this size with the black color, and how that fits into their overall typography type scale of a reflection with that same font down here. I guess goes there. And to me, that feels like an interesting way to approach the type scale. Not bad, but interesting. Look at the font. Montserrat. better is using the Montserrat font. Okay, so we've got some discussion going on about some of these things. I feel like I'm not sure how to interpret where everybody's feeling in terms of jumping into their own design. It's often a different thing to look at other people's designs and then try to start from scratch, blank slate of your own designs. So I want to be able to address any questions or concerns you have going into that. If I can help right now during class. So does anybody have any questions about jumping into this process that we've been talking about so far?
No questions right now.
From my perspective, the most important thing that you can do is to just jump forward, start into that process, iterating through those sketches and ideation, and make changes and updates, check things out. How do they work together? Just do that as rapidly as possible. And as you get more of that under your belt, then it'll feel more natural to land on something that you actually like. So not staring at a blank canvas or blank piece of paper and just hesitating about getting started, but just jumping into it, getting all that material that you've got, that you've already written, and then just start building from those building blocks of that content. And then from there, you make those iterations. Okay, so in speaking of implementation, that you will need a domain name when you are getting ready to get this portfolio up and live. That's not something we're doing necessarily right now, but they're generally $10 to $60 a year for a name. But at Lambda, we actually have I should pull this up now. We have a code that we can give you that if you haven't already, you can get your domain name for cheap. And we recommend people using their name as their domain name. So I've got two. I've got christiandraper.com and drdraper.com. And those both are using my name and trying to feel professional. And as a designer, that's probably the best thing you can do. If you can get it as just first name, last name, or last name, first name, or some variation of that, that reads very clearly who you are in the URL. And some people might put like Christian Draper UX as their domain name, something that ties design into it. Draper Design or Christian Draper Design, something can often be a good one. There are also, I think design might be one of the new URLs that you can use, like christiandraper.design, but those are more expensive and oftentimes harder to get as well. So let me share this link with you. If you fill out this form that I just posted into the channel, you can, it'll reach out to the people who are in charge of the careers like Kathleen and Kelsey and others, and they will respond with a code that you can use to get a free domain name from Namecheap. So that's a good place to start. You get your domain name, it'll give you a free year's domain, and then you would have to renew on your own, and it's usually relatively inexpensive to renew for a full year. You can code it for free if you're filling up on your coding skills that we've developed here using netlify.com or GitHub, pages.github.com, or you can have a friend code it. There are developers at Lambda School who, in the past, we've asked them if they'd be interested in coding up a designer's portfolio site for them as just experience for them. And we've had several volunteers. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. Or if as you're working in labs, you get to know someone who's a front-end coder, then you can ask them if they're interested. But that's always nice to have someone build it for you. And then there are these other site builders. Card.co is one that Nick has recommended. It's less expensive. I haven't used it much. I have a Wix site. That's what drdraper.com is built on. I haven't used Webflow, but have heard good things. And then squarespace.com is another one that's pretty robust. And one of the portfolios that we looked at yesterday, it was actually built on Squarespace, and I didn't realize it until I was reviewing it again today. But it didn't look like a cookie cutter portfolio. A lot of these have templates, and you can mix and match and pieces, and you can begin to piece together your design using these tools. Some are more flexible than others. So sometimes if you were to use those, you'd have to adapt. But each of those also have an annual or monthly fee. So take that into consideration. Then we're going to do one more exercise of reviewing and doing a design audit. So we have a shared document as you go through. I want you to take the time to do this again in a few minutes, so that you're thinking through what you're seeing in the design. Because a lot of times we come back and we look at the portfolio site and we think, oh, I like this, or this resonates with me, and we don't dig into those details of what are they doing with their design that makes it successful in our minds. What spacing, alignment, repetition, color usage are they doing that makes this a positive experience for me? So let's do this. Let's see if I figured out sharing settings well enough to do this right the first time. And it's posted in the channel. I'll put on the timer again we'll do 10 minutes today, so that we can, because I think there might be more to talk about in looking at these designs. So go ahead and go back to bestfolios.com. I'll share the student link. And I just want you to grab one of those URLs and have everybody paste the URL that they're looking at into this document and go through the process of responding to those prompts that are in that design audit document. So what typefaces are they using? Are they using more than one? And if so, does it work having those two different fonts? And what do you like or dislike about them? What colors are they using? Which primary colors, secondary, grayscale? How well do the colors go together? Are they using a lot of color or just accents? How does their white space look? Are they following the design principles? Are they ignoring any? Does it work? What do you find interesting about it? What do you like about their design? What do you dislike? What else do you want to remember about it? If everyone can jump into that design audit and let me know if the share settings work this time, then I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes. I'd like to get everybody having at least one of these portfolios in there as an example. We have about 3.5 minutes left. If you've already filled in all the blanks, you can try to go to another site and fill in some more, or you can add more details. It looks like a lot of people have just entered like listing of fonts, but haven't made any value judgments about them, what works, what doesn't. So feel free to jump in there and add some commentary about why you like things, what's good, what's bad in the last 3 minutes here.
Hey, Christian, I think you're still muted.
Thank you. So I was just curious if anybody has any comments about anything they observed in doing this exercise with any of the portfolios they had seen. Some of them, it looks like some people were looking at portfolios they probably already had seen before, and curious if any new insights came from doing this exercise, or if it's somebody new that you hadn't looked at before. What insights did you have from those?
One insight that I got was there's his name is John Price, and he's a senior design lead, but it looks like his approach is a lot more minimal. and someone who's just, who's just a designer would want something to pop out a little bit more.
So that's this example.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like extremely minimal. So maybe someone who's already a senior designer, it's like, I want to just show my strongest pieces and not too much that is, too flashy.
I think that is the tendency, especially in UI design.
Mm-hmm.
As your design matures, there doesn't feel like a need to add anything, and we begin to want to pull things away. So that is, in my view, certainly I've seen that a lot before. And sometimes it feels like it's a little too simple. Sometimes it feels just fine, and I can jump into the other material I need to look at. But that's a good observation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, gotcha.
All right, let's review today's assignment. First thing we want you to do is to read over everything that you've written this week. Refamiliarize yourself with all of that content. Be aware of the pieces that you have. And then look for trends or key details that you want to highlight. So anything that might make a good call out or a featured image or anything like that. Think about how you would represent each of those. Go through the portfolios that you've reviewed this week, and then also look at the other portfolios in those 3 spreadsheets that we have used in each of our classes. Look at what some of the notes that you've taken and others have taken. And remember, it's okay to borrow elements that you like from other people. Just you're not going to want to recreate somebody's own design as your own. But using patterns or design styles in a similar way is certainly acceptable. And so be thinking about those patterns that you might want to use in your portfolio. Based on your information architecture and your inspiration, come up with 3 low fidelity pencil and paper concepts for your portfolio. Try to make each version of your design as different as possible. Explore all your possibilities. Don't focus on the little details right now. Keep your mind on that bigger picture. What are the main elements of the UI? How do things fit together? What happens if you reorder elements? Take pictures of that work and include them in your Google Doc or Google Drive folder. Based on your content and ideation, pick a primary color and typeface that embodies what you and what you're communicating. And then we've got some of that material we talked about today regarding fonts and colors. Now, we're only asking for 3 different sketches, but my feeling is that you have enough time in your assignment time today that you should be able to sketch through a dozen or more different ideas. These are low fidelity, so just cranking through these ideas, using brainstorming techniques, using techniques of deviation, coming up with broad ideas. Take some random concept like a bus or a puppy and say, how does my portfolio relate to a puppy? How can I design with that in mind? And that will open your mind to crazy ideas. And from those ideas, probably won't be something that you would use from that puppy idea, but maybe there's pieces that you could pull that expand on what you've already ideated. So those are stretch goals to do additional designs, but my recommendation is just to iterate as fast and quickly as you can through as many different and drastically different ideas as you can to land on 3 that you feel more strongly about. These will become a building block for doing wireframes, etc., moving forward. Any questions about the assignment?
I don't get the first part. Sorry, what are we supposed to do? I understand the last one. I understand the ideation. It's like basically what it should kind of look like in a sketch, but I don't understand review your
So this is really just helping you. So when you're jumping into your sketch, you want to have fresh in your mind all of the content that you've already written. So, and all of the photos or images or sketches that you have from your content writing, so that you know what it is that you will have to work with in your design.
From like the stuff that like basically our build week project, or do you mean the stuff that we
so
worked on so far, the portfolio work?
So it's what you did over the last few days. So you should have written some content and gathered content for just the main and about me and all of that, and then you should have done case study work and started writing case studies. So all of that material is what we're talking about. So some of it's regarding your build week, some of it's just about you and your personal narrative, all of that. It's basically so that you have on hand and in your mind the building blocks that you're working from to make this portfolio site. Both the main page and any other ancillary pages that you have in mind to create, plus your case study format. And a little note about case studies. I realized that you probably are looking at your Build Week project and thinking this isn't a very good case study. But our objective was to go through that process to help you understand how to write one, to write it using content that you have. And it could be that you can turn that case study into something usable on your site, but most likely you'll end up writing new case studies once you're in labs to feature those ones. But I will say, if you come to a site and there is just one case study, that doesn't look as good as if you have 2 or 3. So working towards having more is going to be great. And if the last one in that list is the case study that you've just written about your build week, that might be okay because you're featuring your better work, and then you have something that's still there, but they're probably not actually going to get to as a hiring manager, because once they hit the first or second case study, then they're not necessarily going to need to dive into a third because they've got what they know. But on that page that lists all your projects, you have a third that speaks to your abilities, and that looks better than less, if that makes sense. But if it's a very terrible case study that doesn't showcase any value, then you definitely don't want to include it. But I'm just mentioning that it could be salvageable if right now you're thinking it's not. But it definitely won't be your featured case study for when you're going into the hiring manager or sending out your resumes and things. Okay, any questions? Let's look at Slido. Nothing there. Last call for questions. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day and a good sprint challenge tomorrow. And I will see you for question and answers after that in the afternoon. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.